You can't download TikTok currently, as of recording, on the Google App Store or the Apple App Store. So people are selling iPhones with TikTok pre-downloaded in the States.
Really?
So yeah, up to $10,000. I don't think any have been sold for that much, but they are going for $3,000, $4,000, and it literally says in the listing with TikTok downloaded, and the photos show the app functioning because nobody new can download it at the moment.
I don't know whether that's just ingenious or horrifying, or I don't know, but kind of weird.
I think it's very creative.
This is Jo McDonnell, Director of Consumer Insight at WGSN. Today, we're talking TikTok and the future of social media as we know it. Now, as you are probably more than aware, TikTok was unavailable to US users for less than a day over the weekend leading up to President Trump's inauguration, ahead of a widely publicised ban that was due to come into force following a congressional bill requiring TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to find a US-approved buyer or shut down TikTok nationwide. It might be back up and running now, but for how long? And TikTok isn't the only social media platform in the spotlight. Meta is also attracting attention on its apps, Facebook and Instagram, following Mark Zuckerberg's changing policies when it comes to things like moderation. So what is happening in the world of TikTok and social media? And with its long-term future now uncertain in the US, what's the future for TikTok? To help answer this and more, my guest for this episode is Jo McDonnell, Director of Consumer Insight, who is one of our social media forecasters. I'm Carla Bazaschi, CEO of WGSN, the world's leading trend forecasting company. And you're listening to Lives of Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast about how we'll live our lives in the future. Jo, please can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello, I'm Jo McDonnell, as you said. I'm the Director of Insight, so exploring everything across macro forecasting, consumer forecasting, retail, and marketing, and all of the cross sections between them.
So let's outline, let's kind of get the foundations here. What has actually happened to TikTok in the US?
So there's a few characters in this, so we're going to have to try and follow along a little bit. So ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, has been under suspicion or accusation of potentially passing over data to the Chinese government about US users.
All of which they completely deny, we should say.
They completely deny, exactly. But the US government a couple of years ago issued a statement saying that TikTok can't be downloaded on government phones. UK government has done something similar. In Denmark, they've also done something similar. So there are these accusations. And funnily enough, Trump, and he's a bit of a recurring character in this drama, initially started stoking the TikTok skepticism and in many ways put the wheels in motion for this ban with an executive order back in 2020. And in April last year, the US government put a law in forcing TikTok's owners, ByteDance, to sell part ownership of the app or to stop operating in the States. They face a ban in the States. The Supreme Court gave ByteDance up until the 19th of January to find a US buyer, but the company didn't follow through on the US's demands. And what's interesting from contacts that I know at TikTok, especially in the States, is my understanding is across this time period, it's very much been business as usual. Some social media users go as far as to say that potentially this was a stunt done in collaboration with Trump, something that I should say that TikTok denies. But when Trump was sworn in as president, one of his first acts was to give ByteDance a 75-day extension, which he said would give TikTok more time to find a US partner. So actually, the app only went dark for about 16 hours. And being in the States across that time period, you were hit with a splash page that said, this app no longer functions in this region. And then, kind of mere hours later, you were hit with another splash page that says, thanks to Trump, this is now accessible again for a short period of time. So we're kind of in the midst of this. It was one of the 26 executive orders that Trump signed in just 2 days as president. And he's now looking for alternatives. What is the future of TikTok here?
So some of the stuff that I was watching and listening to was very much people who relied on it for their small businesses. So yes, there was I can't connect with friends and, the people who just love watching it for all the videos. But there are people who rely on TikTok as their shopfront to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, unsurprisingly, the ban is phenomenally unpopular. In the States, for a country that values freedom, values free speech, people were not happy about the ban. And it really cuts across both ends of the aisle, if I'm honest. It's a bit of a uniting factor. I was actually over in the States for the inauguration and spoke to a whole number of people about the ban. Everyone echoed the same thing. It was unpopular. I was talking to one couple who didn't use it for their income, but consumed content on there saying how people are signing petitions. Everyone kind of wants this resolved as quickly as possible. It's an enormous draw for small businesses. The algorithm is somewhat unique in the fact that it's a push algorithm rather than a pull algorithm. You don't need to follow anyone. You get businesses, content delivered to you. So that's phenomenal from a small business perspective because it allows you to create content showcasing your product, have it reach new audiences. But then there's also the other angle, which is TikTok is essentially a massive recommendation engine. So you've got people doing product reviews, people saying, this type of product's fantastic. You know, there's an entire hashtag called TikTok made me buy it, which obviously showcases products, showcases their benefits, pushes it to new people. And then people go out and purchase these items, and in many cases sell out. So yeah, there was a phenomenal backlash to it. I was actually at Trump's victory rally, and the biggest cheer in the audience was for when he said TikTok was going to be unbanned. The entire place exploded. Probably second biggest cheer was when Elon Musk came on stage. So make of that what you will, but without a doubt, it was the biggest reaction for that 45 minutes that he was talking was on TikTok. And certainly talking to people, it still is a major issue.
That's insane. So have you tried any of the alternative sites like Red Note, which are suddenly kind of, household names, which literally a week or so ago weren't?
I have been on Red Note. I must admit, Red Note's had a huge flux of users, but Red Note, I think the important thing to know about it is that it is a Chinese app and it's mainly aimed at people in China or the Chinese diaspora worldwide. Up until this week, or kind of last week now, it was only available in Chinese, and the kind of development team was frantically scrambling to make an English version. It's very much the protest vote. And actually this week, now that TikTok's been unbanned, it's dropped out of the app charts. So it's no longer the most downloaded app in the States anymore. Obviously, it was last week. Thing that's really interesting that I have noticed is creeping in this week is a free VPN. So I think probably consumers are looking for ways to circumvent the ban, in 75 days. So the thing that's interesting about Red Note is, like I said, it was the protest vote. So people kind of moving to the platform, a lot of dialogue between Chinese users and American users. It created some hilarious situations, people sharing their grocery shops, comparing prices, interacting with each other, sharing videos of cats, all very, very charming. My understanding is a kind of week on, a lot of Chinese users are kind of getting quite fed up with English users on the app and the dual language and kind of interacting with each other. It seems very much like the novelty's worn off on both sides.
Okay, all right. So TikTok doesn't need to worry too much that they've lost all these users to somewhere else. They're ready and waiting and finding potential routes around any ban that might come in after this grace period is over. Let's talk about some of the other social media companies. We've kind of heavily focused on TikTok up until now. So Mark Zuckerberg has been in the media again, when is he not, for changing some of his editorial policies, certainly moderation policies. He's definitely put himself in the Trump camp now. And we are seeing, I guess, a backlash from the other side of the aisle to that. How much of an impact do you actually think this is going to have on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, etc.?
Well, the thing that's interesting is, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, Mark came on camera and he had a new haircut and he had a bit of a tan. And actually, the photos that went viral had a chain photoshopped into the picture. He has since adopted that chain, and it was a real kind of glow up moment. And he was presenting himself as cool Mark. Mark's on your side. And there was a real swell of positivity towards him, towards Meta platforms. Definitely, this TikTok ban, social media users are pinning, rightly or wrongly, a lot of the blame on Zuckerberg, on Musk. They feel as if there's plot out to get TikTok. I think a lot of users really interestingly view it as the last pure social media platform. They compare it to something like Instagram, and the sentiment is Instagram is filled with ads. Your friends aren't there anymore. TikTok has less ads, full stop. But the ads that are there are much more engaging. They're usually created in partnership with content creators. It feels much more like native advertising. So there's this kind of sentiment coming through, kind of negativity towards particularly Zuckerberg. Just this week, there was Facebook hastened to add, or Meta hastened to add, that this was an error. But if you search Democrats on Instagram, the hashtag came up with no results. Whereas if you search Republican, you could see everything. It was like a normal search. Same if you searched Obama, Nancy Pelosi, a whole range of different hashtags. Facebook or Meta came out and said this was just a mistake. This was an error. At this point, it kind of doesn't matter whether it was an error or not. It's just not a great look at all. Lots of users saying that they will never go to a Meta platform. I think that's just not the case. Millions of people in the States already have Instagram accounts. They've got captive audiences. It's a very easy transition to Reels, etc. Long term, I think that's probably what's going to happen if this ban goes ahead. I think the other interesting thing is if you look at something like X, and obviously Musk bought X a number of years ago and has turned it very much into the free speech platform. You know, I've spoken to a number of people, senior people at brands around the world with large marketing budgets, and a number of them are pulling back from X. The interesting thing here is I used to work for a range of luxury brands, and as you do with any digital campaign, you have a massive list of negative keywords. These are words you don't want to be associated with. All sorts of kind of terrible words across the full spectrum, but also some things that, are probably more contentious. So something like Brexit would come in. As a luxury brand, you don't want to be associated anywhere near an issue that's going to cause anxiety, divide with people. Exactly. And I think the thing about X is you take off these moderation controls, you add community notes, you stop fact checking as Zuckerberg came out and said, and it pivots the platform much more towards a unsafe brand environment. It becomes much, much riskier to advertise, to engage on these platforms. And we've definitely seen a number of brands stepping away from X as a result. Now that this is creeping into Meta as well, I think the question mark is Meta products traditionally have been the bread and butter, the most efficient way to reach people, particularly across the States. To what extent are they now going to move away from this? I think that's the real question.
Let's take a little break from the topic to find out a bit more about you with our quickfire questions. But because of the topic, because we're talking social media, we're making them slightly more focused than we normally do. So regular listeners, some of these are going to be different to the ones you would always hear. So let's start with, can you remember one person from your MySpace top friends?
Oh, good question. I can remember a few. It was mainly my school friends. There were only about 6 of us in our year, and I think you had to have all of them as your top friends, otherwise you'd risk falling out with someone.
Okay. X or Blue Sky?
Very much Blue Sky.
Okay. YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels?
YouTube Shorts. I have been spending more and more time on YouTube. I think the quality of content on YouTube in general has just gone on leaps and bounds. Some of it you can't believe is made by content creators. They don't have enormous budgets behind them. Slight pivot to that. Obviously, you look at somebody like Mr. Beast, but some of the content that he creates, giving away millions of dollars, doing the most ridiculous stunts in the entire world. I know he's become a little bit of a media machine now, but absolutely exceptional, the fact that he was an independent content creator and now he's partnering with Amazon and doing all sorts of things. And I think any topic, any holiday, any region you search on YouTube, you will find excellent content deep diving into whatever it is.
I don't know what my search history is throwing up, but I'm getting spammed with the Mr. Beast Amazon ads at the moment. I've never watched a Mr. Beast video in my entire life, although the fact I've just said that a number of times, I'm probably going to get even more of them now. What's the longest amount of time you've doom scrolled?
Days, weeks, years. A little trick, I must admit, is if you're on a flight now, most flights have Wi-Fi. If you buy the Wi-Fi package, you can shorten a flight by about half by just doom scrolling the entire way. It's fabulous. It's a time machine.
Dog or cat videos?
Always dog videos. I see the merits of both, but we're a dog family, so I'm much more closely aligned with dogs and their kind of naivety about the world.
Which person are you following on social media that you rarely share with others? I guess you're sort of like guilty social media pleasure.
Oh, good question. There is fantastic. I'm recommending them now, so maybe it's not so much a guilty pleasure, but Map Men, who are two guys who just love maps and kind of slightly zany history. And it's almost a little bit horrible histories.
Oh, wow.
And they will do something like explore why the tube goes in kind of a wiggly direction through London. And it's comedy, but it's factual. And actually, they've been around for quite a long time, but they've just started going on TikTok, and they were nominated for Video of the Year. And it was an old video, and they just converted it to the platform, and they did a whole sweet kind of campaign around it about how they're just recycling content. They've made the best video on TikTok this year. I really, really recommend it. If you're into maps and geography and history and kind of slightly childish comedy, they're brilliant. Well worth a follow.
Okay, Map Men. All right, I'm going to add it to my follow list. Where do you get the news first? Social media or traditional media?
A little bit of a combo of both. Social media, just the speed at which it's delivered to you is incredible. The thing that I find interesting about it is, particularly on TikTok, you just have to check that date because the algorithm will push stuff. So if Obama says something and Obama's in the news, you will start getting Obama videos, and it could be a clip from 5 years ago. And without that context. So I think probably the awareness piece is social media, and then for deep thought, pivot onto traditional media. But I also throw in podcasts in there. So news podcasts, just sensational. The BBC does their daily news podcast. The News Agents with Emily Maitlis, Lewis Goodall, John Sopel, fantastic analysis. US based as well. Just try and get as big a suite as possible after you've seen the funny clip on social media.
Go and fact check. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to look to the future now and try and work out what's coming. So let's go back to TikTok. What do you think the future for TikTok is in the US and globally?
So if I had to speculate, and I'm prepared to be called up on this as being wrong in the future, I don't think it's going to be banned. So Trump has obviously granted this 75-day extension. He's started talking about a joint venture with the US government taking over 50% or 52% of the platform. He quoted it as being worth something like $1 trillion. I think that's his exact quote, or being worth nothing. And he is very, very pro TikTok because he connected with the youth vote. He did say 36% increase in youth voters because of his TikTok account. That's not quite true. He did improve it last year on the last election, but Kamala still got the bulk of the youth vote. But I think that this is too valuable a product, and it's too important in people's lives to end up being banned in the States. Now, that's obviously, I've come down pretty firmly on that side. I'm ready to be proved wrong on it, but it's so important in marketing. It's so important in the way trends develop, the way that products are shared. It's a referral engine. Enormous companies get incredible engagement on the platform, and I think there's a lot of weight behind them. So I think it will still be there in some form, whether it's a joint venture or whether somebody buys it, like Mr. Beast, who is apparently pulling together a team of investors to purchase it. Musk allegedly is also interested. So I think there's a number of routes, and it's just be fascinating to see what happens over the next 75 days.
Let's not forget, for lots of Western companies to operate in China, they have to have a joint venture. So it isn't an unheard of solution, certainly for Chinese companies. So many operate that way. Okay, and now let's expand a little bit further out. Let's talk about social media in general. How do you think it's going to evolve? Because there's the other, we haven't even got on to the topic of concerns about the amount of hours that young people are spending on, but actually, let me change that. Just people in general are spending on social media, the lack of human interaction as a consequence. This is a very big topic. But what are your predictions for the future of social media?
there's a lot here, right? There's a lot of things permeating through this. I think the first one is that your friends are sharing less. So people just are sharing less. They're sharing less on Instagram. TikTok, very slightly different in that it is mainly professional, in inverted commas, content creators. I know some people do create content for the platform, but it's viewed as this alternative to TV. So when people stop sharing on social media, obviously the importance, the value of these platforms goes down somewhat. I think from a brand perspective, businesses don't like disruption. The markets don't like disruption. We're seeing this huge fragmentation across the space. So a lot of users are engaging in small scale sharing. So either private groups sharing direct content with friends. There's a really interesting theory that we've covered a lot at WGSN, and the jury's out on how accurate it is, but it's something absolutely you should read up on and develop a perspective on. And it's around the dead internet theory. And this idea that AI is permeating so much through society, and there's so many bots on something like Facebook that it's just bots interacting with bots. And there's a few case studies on this. So with the rise of AI created imagery, you're kind of getting concepts spliced together. So go with me. A bot creates an image and it has a hashtag that somebody has built a bike out of plastic bottles. Somebody in Africa has created a motorbike out of plastic bottles, and that gets incredible engagement. And then they create another post around a flight attendant saving a baby. And then the next post that this bot creates uses the main hashtags, and this time it's a flight attendant riding a motorbike made out of plastic bottles. I'm butchering this a little bit, but imagine just optimization of kind of random concepts being generated together. And then you end up in a situation where people are interacting with these images on Instagram, on Facebook, and they're clearly AI generated, but people, for whatever reason, are believing them.
Or they don't mind.
Or they don't mind.
Generated. Yeah.
They're so clearly kind of fantastical images that presumably these people interacting with them must be bots as well. And then when you've got an internet dominated by bots, with content being created by bots, just reinforcing each other and just spiraling, there's no space for human beings in there. So it's an interesting theory. Certainly you see some of these screenshots and you think these cannot be real people. They cannot be real people engaging with them. So yeah, there's a lot to unpick. The other element, of course, is decentralized social media. So much more based out of the crypto space, peer-to-peer interactions, something like Mastodon. This is yet to catch on kind of on a mass level. I think generally people go to platforms where their friends are, and we're yet to see that critical mass on any of these peer-to-peer platforms. So yeah, it's an interesting time. It very much feels like the last days of Rome for a lot of these platforms, for a lot of the ways we consume it. And like we said earlier, Facebook now is over 20 years old. The audience is aging.
What was the one? It was very UK based. And it was the first one where people started like finding their old school friends and then having affairs and getting married.
Friends Reunited.
Friends Reunited.
Yeah.
That was it. I don't know why I'm remembering a bit like people having affairs and getting married. I think that's just what all the British newspapers used as the hook when they were talking about Friends Reunited. Yeah, these things that came and went because they created the foundations for what was built on top. And no doubt, in my mind, that is what's going to happen. But I think your point about the dead internet, which is really interesting, and again, I don't want to turn this into a whole topic on AI, but if we see AI as the next version of the Industrial Revolution, and there are plenty of people who believe it genuinely is, then that does have an impact on everything, and therefore the internet has to evolve as a consequence. And humans do, I say this I think on every podcast, humans do still want human interaction. We're wired, our biology means that we need to be around human beings, and if we're not getting that from whatever interaction, whether that's a virtual or in real life one, then we'll find other ways.
Yeah, definitely. And those face-to-face, those IRL interactions are becoming a luxury. They're becoming a status symbol. And that is also one of the reasons why sharing less is somewhat the new luxury, right? Because it almost leaves the question, what are you doing? Why aren't you sharing? You're obviously doing something fantastic in real life and you don't need to share it. So very much a trend across youth culture, across social media as well in coming years.
We shouldn't forget that TikTok's banned in India, and that country and the consumers in that country found a way around it. And the brands there, Western brands who might be using TikTok or the like elsewhere, worked out a way of connecting with those consumers. So should brands right now be looking to that market or markets that are similar to work out how they operate in potentially a post-TikTok world?
Yes and no. I think India banned TikTok in about 2020 after some skirmishes on the border with China. There's still hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of TikTok users within India accessing it through VPNs. And back to my point earlier, clearly that's kind of what American consumers are doing. On that note, I actually saw that people are selling, you can't download TikTok currently, as of recording, on the Google App Store or the Apple App Store. So people are selling iPhones with TikTok pre-downloaded in the States.
Really?
So yeah, up to $10,000. I don't think any have been sold for that much, but they are going for $3,000, $4,000, and it literally says in the listing with TikTok downloaded, and the photos show the app functioning because nobody new can download it at the moment.
I don't know whether that's just ingenious or horrifying, or I don't know, but kind of weird.
I think it's very creative.
Yeah, very enterprising. Let's go with that.
Yeah, very, very enterprising. So users will find a way around the ban. Obviously, it depends in exactly what form it comes. For brands, it's about risk mitigation. So it's partly about finding a safe harbor. You can test apps like RedNote or Lemon8, which is another ByteDance owned platform. Probably the safest option short term is to pivot towards something established and try and start building up your audience there, transferring content over something like YouTube Shorts, Snap, Instagram Reels, etc., and basically wait for this uncertainty to go over. Other strategies focused around creating content about the ban, very much the last days of Rome. Somebody like Duolingo is fantastic at this. They've always been the darlings of TikTok marketing a little bit. Fantastic content creation, social team of, I think, mainly Gen Z, about 4 or 5 of them. They created content in the run up to the ban. They revealed who was in their bird costume that appears in all their videos. Sony Pictures, Sony Music create a whole range of clips from their films about the ban, even going as far as to throw shade at Instagram and Mark Zuckerberg through these clips. And, users even commenting, wow, I didn't know Sony had it up against Meta. I don't know if somebody's getting told off somewhere in California about that currently.
Why do you think that consumers don't have the fears that government have about TikTok? Or US government? Well, actually, no, government, as you pointed out, British government also brought in similar rules for government employees.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, like I said, it definitely on the surface appears to be an issue that unites both sides of the aisle in the States. So every consumer seems to be anti the ban, definitely that I spoke to when I was in the States. There's a feeling that data is already being harvested. There's a lot of backlash, like I said, about the other tech platforms for harvesting their data. There are anecdotal memes just about how good the TikTok platform is, how entertaining it is. I've seen videos of people saying, I will hand deliver my data to whoever's collecting it if I can keep the platform. I've learnt this is how you cut a cucumber. This is how you wash your sheets properly. This is how you change the oil in a car. I've learned more on this app than I did in school. And if I have to hand over some data, I'll do it. All the way through to people photocopying their passports and social security numbers and putting them in an envelope and addressing them to China and sending them off. And obviously we should say the kind of data allegations are all allegations, right? But users have jumped on that bandwagon. And yeah, from a kind of government perspective, very much the other social media platforms are driven out of the US. They're kind of homegrown US platforms, and TikTok, while it is owned, it's a subsidiary of the Chinese company, and it is also banned in China. It is a different app in China. By governments, it's very much seen as a foreign entity, and I just don't think consumers feel the same way.
Okay, last question. Are you more anxious or hopeful about the future of social media?
I think there's a lot to unpack, right? I think I view TikTok a lot like our data shows people view it. It's an entertainment source, right? It's an alternative for entertainment. I think social media has been linked to a whole number of negative externalities on society, right? It's been linked to mental health issues. It's been linked to a range of things. I feel we're entering a new chapter, whether that's decentralized social media, whether that is small scale sharing. A change is happening. Like I mentioned earlier, we're now entertained by professional content creators. And the trade-off for that is you don't know what your friend is doing at the weekend unless you pick up the phone and ring them. But the quality of what you get back in return is absolutely sensational. And when society is pivoting more towards in real life interactions, pivoting more towards that being a sign of luxury, being offline, unplugged as a sign of luxury. And when you plug in also all the AI stuff as well, and the fact that content is being created by AI, videos are being created by AI, I think you will end up in a world where what you're consuming through social media is high quality professional entertainment, however that looks. And then your socializing is done much more offline or much more small scale. And I think, again, quote me, come back to me in 5 years. I think that's going to be more positive. It's certainly going to be more positive for me. I think it's going to remove pressure associated with sharing, pressure associated with cultivating this ideal life, push you much more back to community, small scale interactions.
Thank you so much, Joe McDonnell, Director of Consumer Insight at WGSN, for joining us today. Please do check out our other podcast, Create Tomorrow, with my amazing colleague, Cassandra Napoli. A new episode is up now talking about the National Retail Federation in New York with Megan Hurley, Vice President of Global Marketing at Claire's. So thank you all for now. I'll be returning with a new episode of Lives of Tomorrow in 14 days. My name's Carla Bizashi. I'm the CEO of WGSN. Until next time.